All right, so let's do our brief intros. How about we start with Sandra?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra West, Sustainable Waste Specialist at the at the Sustainability Office in the city of Albuquerque. I just had lunch, so you can tell where my blood is. And I'm excited to be here talking about composting. I'll turn it over to Logan.
All right,
Logan,
I'm Logan One I'm an intern here at the City of Albuquerque's Sustainability Office. Um, yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks, Logan. How about Stephen?
Hey, I'm Steve Glass. I am the board chair at Ciudad Soil and Water Conservation District, also a participant in the Master Composters program with Cooperative Extension, and an avid composter on many levels. I have little ones in my backyard. I ran the big compost facility out on the West Mesa for a number of years, and our conservation district now has two big grants from EPA and USDA, thanks to Sandra West with the city of Albuquerque, to do food waste reduction and composting, both at in the public schools as well as at community centers and across the watershed. So let's see, Navona, do you want to call on somebody, or we're gonna popcorn? You want me to pass it to someone?
Yeah, let's pass it on.
Okay. Let's go to John.
Hey, everybody. John Zarola, Bernalillo County Extension Master Composter. And our mission is to share home composting information with the public. And we've been doing that for 15 years now. Thank you.
Super. I'll call on somebody. How about Eva? Hey.
Hey all, Eva Stricker. I'm here at the UNM main campus. I'm a research faculty in the Department of Biology. And I like to help people compost however it works for them.
Super. Christy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Christy Everett. We have a small ranch near Corona, New Mexico, and I have a small backyard composting thing, but I'm looking at possibly using compost to help revegetate after the wind farm construction that's going on our place right now.
Interesting. And Rob.
Hi there, nice to see everyone this morning. And my name is Rob Hirsch. I am the Executive Director of the Climate Change Leadership Institute and a co-founder of the Healthy Soil Working Group. And I definitely support composting and want to have our state provide incentives and grants and things to do more local composting around the state. I bring my food scraps to Reunity Resources here in our community. And nice to be with everyone today.
Thanks, Rob. Isabel, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Isabel Janiches, also with the Healthy Soil Working Group. Definitely an avid composter all the time. And what's coming to your inbox pretty soon is exciting new bill in the state legislature that would support human composting in New Mexico, which is a growing movement across the nation. So look for that action alert either today or tomorrow or in the next couple of days. So, and it's called SB 368, expanding the definition of cremation, sponsored by Senator Liz Stefanik. And we'll send an action alert pretty soon.
It's possible very soon, but it's also possible early next week as well. We're not 100% sure because the business committee that is listening to this might be needing to take certain tax related bills first, but they're determining this, and we'll let you know with an action alert soon, one way or the other.
Thanks for the breaking news. Okay, thanks. I think that's everyone who is here in our meeting live. And so in a moment, I'm excited to hear from our guest who has generously joined us from Las Cruces, from the USDA Agricultural Services at Jornada Experimental Range. So Sheri Spiegal is a Rangeland Management Specialist and is working on manure sheds and how to create a circular economy and incorporate manure sheds into, or the compost that could come from manure into the communities around them. So yeah, love to hear what you're doing and what you would like to share with us, Sheri.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you all today. I apologize for my technical difficulties. I am a federal researcher, so things have been going a little oddly with our computers recently, so I apologize. I have some slides if that's okay. Let me see what I can do here. Is it really windy for other folks and dusty today all over? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really windy.
Let me see.
It's like we need healthy soil or something.
Yes, go figure. Is this in presentation mode? Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks again. So glad to be here. So let's see. So as Navona said, so I am from the Jornada Experimental Range. So that's in a USDA Agricultural Research Service unit in Las Cruces. So we have a 300 square mile piece of property where we do research on how arid systems work in different conditions, in drought, in wind, and under grazing, and with various wildlife. So we have that, but then I'm on the New Mexico State campus. That's where our office is. And and I'm a Rangeland Management Specialist, which means I work just pretty much everything under the umbrella of rangeland, so ecological and social and economic. We are part of the Long-Term Agroecosystem Research Network, or LTAR. Has anybody heard of LTAR before? I'm always curious how much this gets out into the world. Okay, not many. Well, now you know. So it's the Long-Term Agroecosystem Research Network, or LTAR. So this is actually a congressionally funded research network that evaluates strategies for local and regional, call it agricultural sustainability, resilience, regeneration, regenerativeness, but under this nationally coordinated umbrella of data and information and knowledge and exchange. So it's a real honor and a privilege to work in LTAR. Let me just move yes, we have partners in other countries, and knowledge co-production is really at the heart of where we're at. So not just scientists kind of yelling in the echo chamber, but really working with stakeholders and producers and people along supply chains. One thing I wanted to tell you about, one of our central activities is called the Common Experiment, which is regionally specific testing of approaches that are hypothesized to be more sustainable or more resilient or more regenerative than this sort of business as usual approach. So in our region, we're looking at heritage cattle called Raramuri Criollo cattle, precision ranching technologies, grass finishing, as well as now manure application on rangeland. So that's kind of our aspirational or alternative approach that we're looking at. But we have the privilege to work with people who are like in the Corn Belt, like looking at perennial cover and things. But so really different approaches based on the locality, but really this common understanding through these data structures and knowledge structures. One of the things that the network is really interested in are the kind of outcomes of the major forces and the major changes in agriculture over the last century. So really how U.S. agriculture has become concentrated and specialized, whereas before you could have several crops and animals grown on the same farm and have a more circular system. And then through economic forces, through also the Green Revolution, really seeing separation of crops and livestock and really much bigger farms being concentrated, just focusing on those single commodities. And so in the realm of manure, what we see is that certain commodities are really concentrated in certain areas of the country. Like you can see the Corn Belt there in orange on the top. And then the poultry that eat a lot of that corn are down in the southeast. And so we know that the corn goes to the poultry down there, but there aren't really strong mechanisms to make sure that the manure from that poultry goes back to feed the corn and to grow more corn. So we have that broken system there. And as you all know, this stuff impacts air quality, water quality, and quality of life when manure is really concentrated in certain places with kind of no clear mechanism to get it back to a sink. Also deterioration of ecosystems. And then, as you guys are all quite aware of, scarcity of nutrient resources. So before that, manure would go back, create more feed, but now we're relying on fertilizers, which are a bit sketchy in various ways, especially with geopolitical stuff and our reliance on just a whole suite of factors to get enough fertilizer. So enter the Manureshed. So a solutions-oriented platform that we've developed over the years is the Manureshed, which is both a geographic construct and really a management approach. And so the definition here, the land geographically and economically connected to confined animal feeding operations, where manure from those operations can be recycled to meet a suite of goals. So it's really, like I said, it's geographic, but it's also management oriented, and that management is really necessarily usually collaborative. Even though you can have a Manureshed just on a farm, a lot of times people envision them really between farms within a county, or really between or among counties. Are there any questions so far on that? This can be conversational. I don't need to just blather on. Any questions on this so far? Concerns? Comments. Okay, great. Okay, so moving on. So looking at manuresheds in New Mexico, as you probably all know, dairy has really increased here in the last 30 years. There was a 300% increase in milk production since the 1990s. And what we're seeing is that, well, this is changing because of bankruptcy recently, but the number of dairy cows really skyrocketed while the number of dairy farms has declined. So that shows that concentration of bigger farms. So that's what we're dealing with there. So we really just have a lot of manure from the dairies really concentrated in certain areas of New Mexico. And a lot of these, as you've probably seen driving on the 10 and other places, they're dry lot farms. So they have some solid manure that they manage out in the yard, and then some others that is managed as liquid that comes from the milking barn. And that's what you see that goes through that fertigation and actually fertilizes like the hay that goes back into the dairy. But then the dairy people then have to still deal with the solids usually. So, and here's just a picture of down here where I live in the Mesilla Valley. This is a picture of a manure spreader, presumably dairy solid manure from I-10 that made it onto a crop farm, kind of maybe 10 miles away. So this field is in the Manureshed of that dairy area, of that dairy row. But this kind of concentration of manure nutrients has led to concerns about health of people and the environment. So manure can both be a liability in certain contexts and really like a great benefit in others for soil quality and environmental health if managed correctly, like other stuff. And then also savings, agricultural savings, and the bottom line of folks who spend a lot of money on fertilizers. So with all this in mind, the Manureshed Working Group from the Long-Term Agroecosystem Research Network, we went to visit one of the major dairy producers on I-10. This was about 5 years ago now. And we were asking about priorities and sort of what he saw as opportunities and barriers to manure recycling from these pockets of concentrated nutrients. And what he said, one of the things that stuck out was that the whole area is losing farmland where manure can be spread due to urban development. So again, this is down here around the Las Cruces area. And so as we do at the Agricultural Research Service, we took that nugget of concern from a farmer, we turned it into a research endeavor. And so here's a paper that we worked on a year or so after that. So really mapping the locations of the dairies in New Mexico, and then getting a sense of how big their little sheds are around them. Like this shows a 12 kilometer or a 10 kilometer radius around each dairy down here in the Doña Ana pocket of dairies. And really looked at the land use change or in these sheds or in these footprints to see, just to investigate his observations and to see what kind of land use change we had going on in these different areas of dairy in New Mexico. And so, yeah, this is a land use map. What's really interesting, what I learned here, and you guys probably already knew this, but out of all of New Mexico, cropland is only like only covers like 1.5% of the whole state, which is interesting. So that puts it into perspective of making rangelands like a sort of attractive repository sometimes for either compost or manure or composted manure, especially because rangelands have their own issues as well. It's also with water levels, reducing, it's harder for crop folks to integrate manure or compost as much as before. But so anyway, so we looked at this land use change, and I'd be happy to go into more detail of this whole thing later, but we looked at changes from rangeland to cropland to rangeland. And then what we were calling spreadable land, which was either rangeland or cropland, to developed land. And as this dairy farmer had identified, yes, in the Doña Ana Manureshed, there was the most change that we saw over the last 10 years was from this spreadable land to developed land up in Roosevelt County, kind of Roosevelt and Curry County area. There was this flip from rangeland to cropland, which was interesting, mostly probably to do with like conservation reserve program or I don't know, water availability. So we found this. I'd be happy to share this paper, just getting the lay of the land of ag that could use manure, use composted manure, use different types of compost. And as I said, so through this process, identified this kind of intermittent interest in spreading manure or composted manure onto arid rangelands. So this would both be to help dairy folks dispose of those dairy solids and also as a potential restoration effort for rangelands. And so as a rangeland ecologist and person who's like trained in restoration and management on rangeland, this was like at first seemed a concern to me just because it was like, what about the biodiversity? What about all these values? Like, what about the view shed? And then, but the more that I've thought about it and worked with it, it's like, I have definitely come around like probably 180 or 360 or not 360 before that. But anyway, so with this in mind, with this interest in spreading manure onto arid rangelands, we've begun, the Jornada has embarked on ranch research on the application of raw dairy solids. So the solid manure that you see like in those kind of mountains, when you see like one cow up there, it's like the king of the hill, there's always like one up there. But anyway, so my predecessor actually took 20 tons or imported 20 tons of raw manure solids on, this is the Jornada in 1996. So this is the place like north of us, north of town, and applied it in those different rows and then had cattle run over some of those rows to see about integration into the soil. This is on a loamy site, kind of more fine fine soil. And you can see also where they just dumped the rest of the manure down there in that like perpendicular line. So this was started in 1996, and then I've had and then we figured out the plot. This was like the plot setup of how he envisioned like collecting data around this. But so 25 years later, I got to inherit this kind of experiment. And so our null hypothesis when we went out there, I don't know, a few years ago, is that there would be no treatment effect from the manure because it looked like this. So you can't really tell exactly what was going on where and if there was going to be any major effect so this is where those lines were. And so it was hard to see like a signature, but then we set up plots and did find some differences. So the manure on this site, there's both burrow grass and tobosa grass. So two types of grass in like two big patches, or they call them like ecotones. And so we did see differences mostly under the tobosa with some soil health ratings. So we collected the soils, like sent them to Cornell to do the Cornell soil health assessment of soil health, and did find some differences, especially under the tobosa with some of these desirable soil health indicators. We also found some differences let me move myself so I can see this. Yes, we did also find some differences in like the cover of vegetation. So we saw that there was in the tobosa, there was less mesquite where the manure had been applied, which was interesting. And then up in the burrow grass, there was just overall more perennial grass cover where it was applied. So these were like the ways we looked at. I see Eva like looking at this because I know this is of interest in soil to supper. It is really hard to see on the Jornada. It's like so patchy and very drought prone. But anyway, so this is what we found 25 years later. Now that really wet our whistle for an interest in more manure on range research. And I know there's increasing interest in composted manure, not just putting the raw stuff out there. So we are getting in that game. We worked with actually the same dairy family who delivered the manure 25 years ago. We got a new batch of 2 truckloads from Dairy Row, and we composted it. So we started by growing out several samples in the greenhouse to see what was germinating, because we know stakeholders are often concerned about the seeds in there. They're concerned about the PFAS. They're concerned about like persistent herbicides. So we're trying to like test all those like scary chemicals and the seeds. But anyway, we got no seeds out of it. We formed 2 windrows. We've been monitoring it by taking its temperature and turning it and watering it. And then we applied some of this compost to a more sandy site between some dunes. So between some like mesquite dunes where it's been eroded and topsoils have been lost. So I'll show you a little bit about that. So this is a pic. I think I've already showed Eva this before. Anyway, that was the raw manure that we got on the top. And this was turned, the second picture is after 3 turns and watering. And then down below, it's after 7 turns and watering. It looks different to me. I think it's looking pretty good. This is our temperature. So we're kind of tracking this. And I think, so it shows like the variation in the heat rising and then dipping. And then once it dips, we turn and water. And I'm really happy to get some feedback on this approach, and then let it cook a little bit more. And then, so we monitor it. I have the luxury. We lost some staff recently due to cuts, but it was, we have enough staff now to still be monitoring this. So I also am seeing these white things, which I think is good, right? That's good in the right direction, I think. Maybe.
What are these fungi?
Yes, that's a good sign.
I'm having
Okay.
a hard time telling from the photo
That's
Thank you.
actinomycetes. Yeah, it's
Good.
good
Yeah, I
sign.
wasn't sure if they were full on that fungus yet, or if it was like the proto like bacteria before that?
No,
But-
it's in between. It's a bacteria that forms hyphae. Looks like
Okay.
fungus, but it's not. And it's a healthy sign for compost.
Oh, good.
In my view, I've composted for years. When I see that, I'm happy.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, I found it promising too. So we took some photos. Thank you. Thank you. And then this is how we applied it between those dunes. So we have a lot of these interdune areas where mesquite has outcompeted black grama, and then the wind scours the topsoil. And so we're really left with this like bee horizon. And so we're trying this approach to actually knife it in there so we can keep it down. So this is like our first approach with this, and we'll be following it for soil health properties and vegetation, production. Also interested in what wildlife are going to do with this. Okay, so that's our on-ranch research. And then I think, Isabel, I think you sent around the flyer about the Manureshed lunches and summits. So we're also conducting, really just over time, we've done a lot of this mapping. So that mapping that I showed of New Mexico, we've been doing that all across the US and kind of looking at source and sink areas and modeling different approaches to manure recycling, kind of different outcomes. And so I got a little bit of money from the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research to really start just talking to people who enable this type of recycling across landscapes, who enable this type of, redistribution of manure nutrients from concentrated areas to less concentrated areas, if that's the goal. So the work there is really convening people in 3 different states. So this is the flyer for New Mexico. And so the design is really bringing different populations together, talking to them separately, and then having everybody talk together at a summit. So we recently did our 3 lunch discussions in Clovis, where we talked to crop farmers interested in using manure. We talked to dairy farmers who have it. And then another population that we called manurepreneurs, or people who are really into the logistics and movement and potentially other kind of, economic opportunities from either energy production or other opportunities, which there are many in the manure business. We have one yet to go. We're going to do it up in Santa Fe with people who are consider themselves more like conservation professionals of any kind. It's really hard to really actually do this binning because people tend to wear a lot of different hats. But so we've had 3 so far. We hope to do a 4th. And in Santa Fe, and this is just showing the study design. So we're doing this in Minnesota, New Mexico, and Colorado, like convening the different populations, having lunch with them separately, and then convening everybody at summits to talk through things that the different populations kind of identified as problems or challenges and solutions, especially solutions they can work on together. Here's just a little photo of the lunch. We have the farmers do some like mapping exercises to think about flows of feed and manure and like where it's going. So far we've learned that things, as we hypothesize, things are different in these different manure shed areas. So in Minnesota, really what rose to the top was the need for policy regulation. They're already around manure use because there's like so much water, and there's just like research, especially for dryland farmers, about the return on investment of manure use. Colorado, we're not quite yet, but there yet, but it's kind of shaken out that there's a need for better technologies for like manure storage, but then also processing, and people are actually working on an X Prize situation up there where like may the best group win and get all these like millions of dollars to make a new technology. And the idea here is once we get everybody in these states together at these summits, like one vision is potentially building regional nutrient policy councils. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of regional food policy councils, but there is a model out there where it's like these food policy councils. There's a lot of them, as I understand it, on the East Coast, but there's researchers and there's folks in like corporate sides of food chains and then distributors and of course consumers, and they work together to kind of look at opportunities and barriers to their goals, and they work together as kind of like a longitudinal working group. So this is one model that we might think about for these 3 different states, the people who are part of the convenings, and others. And anyway, and so with that is what I wanted to share. And I wanted to also share my email address. And I also wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to be with you all. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, does anyone have any questions, comments? I know I have a couple, but I'd like to hear from everyone else too.
This is John. I could ask Sheri, how many CAFO facilities, maybe you already told us this, but how many CAFO facilities in New Mexico are currently involved with this project?
With this project, so we had 5 only so far, but big ones. They're big ones.
Thank you.
But we're growing, it was, yeah. But we were heartened in Clovis because we really we focused on invitations in Clovis area for this because we were going to do Las Cruces, but there's been a lot of bankruptcy. But so some of the bigger dairy producers came to the lunch to think about opportunities and stuff.
I was in Clayton, New Mexico, several years ago, and they had 2 at the time. They had 2 CAFOs working there. Are you in touch with anybody in Clayton?
Not yet. And I know they have like the beef stuff there that I know a lot of crop farmers do want. But I work with people at the Clayton Livestock Research Center. So, yes, I'm in touch with them, but we were really going for, kind of more of a geographic footprint. But I agree I think if we could think about this as working, not yet. I guess the short answer is not yet. And the long answer is in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This isn't a question, but a comment of that 25-year data set is awesome. And the fact that the perennial grasses are different is what I would hypothesize. And it's great that you finally see it if you have funding to measure it more than 2 years, because we were never seeing any changes in the perennial grasses. I'm like, I think it's going to happen. We just have to wait longer. So
yes,
you just have to wait longer. Awesome.
Yes.
And is that paper's out?
It's not yet. We are working on that and really will be happy to share that. That was that was hard. Yes. And as you know, with just data, it was just recreating those plots, even though he was my predecessor here. It was like we were like super sleuths, like figuring out what the heck he did out there. But we finally, And so, I will be happy to share that when that's published and even before, but.
Well, and it's like, I put it in the chat, but I've also heard, I think people were trying stuff in the 90s and didn't have great GIS. So like, I heard that they did a similar thing at the Sevietta, which would be an amazing comparison, but I haven't been able to figure out where it's at. So I don't know, ask around at Jornada and see if anybody went up to the Sev in the 90s also, because I think they did it here too.
That's so, and because there's also there's one in the Gila as well that was published, but it was, it's on these slopes of kind of like beautiful blue grama. So I'm like, I don't know if we need to, I mean, it's like already doing all right, in my reckoning, you know what I mean? But I could definitely send those papers. Yeah. But yeah, I'll ask about the Sevietta. That yeah, it seems like there's, you know, the interest kind of ebbs and flows kind of with a lot of restoration type research, I've noticed.
What other soil health benefits did you see in those studies besides perennial grasses?
Yes, so so again, we did that cache. I'm very open to doing other soil health panels, but this is just something that we do in the LTAR network. We pay a lot of money to Cornell to pay, but yeah, here's the soil health. These are ratings, so these aren't magnitudes. But it's all normalized kind of against their rating thing that I don't have you worked with Cornell before with the soil health stuff?
A little bit.
Familiar with this.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, we wanted, like, across the network, we wanted just to use one lab, even though, I don't know, it's pretty, I think it has like kind of an East Coast bias, especially with the kind of interpretations that they give. But anyway, there are higher, so yeah, these are the types of things that, these are the indicators that they aggregate from the basic kind of metrics. So it's aggregate stability, active carbon, organic matter, pH, phosphorus, potassium, and then all the minor elements. But yeah, using their looking at their standardized scoring, in the Tobosa patch, the soils are looking, have a healthier score overall 25 years later. I'm looking down in this bottom right panel.
And can you remind us what the practices over those 25 years was? Was it like recurring applications?
No, it was a one-time application with the cattle running. They had, kind of hot wire. And then so the cattle were ran down it a couple of times just to integrate it in there. And then it was, so around here, you would expect some cattle grazing. We have a charismatic megafauna called oryx, so African antelope that were kind of invaded from the Tularosa Basin. So they would have been grazing on this, ton of rabbits and lagomorphs. But yeah, it was a one-time application.
Well, so I'm curious, you mentioned that you were testing for PFAS and hormones and other things in there. Do you have any results from those tests?
Not yet. PFAS is really expensive. So we're just trying to get, there's another ARS unit that we're working with. We're trying to get a deal on basically sending just samples over there, because it's just like a lot for pre-processing. It can be to buy the machine. I don't know why I took this to like the budget, but anyway, to buy the machinery to pre-process to then get the PFAS test, it's like $25,000 or something. And we were not ready to make that investment quite yet. Plus we only have manure from one place so far, but so we don't have results yet. But even if we do have a positive result from our compost pile, we're not going to be 100% sure if it comes from the water that we've been using or from to water it or the manure. So we're still sorting that one out. Yeah.
This is John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Maybe you mentioned this, but I'm just curious. On the CAFO manures, did you check them for salts?
Thank you. That is one thing we are doing. So we're doing a suite of tests on that. We're working with somebody at Colorado State, a grad student. So we send up samples to her, and that's one of our big indicators that we're looking at there.
Okay. And in the piles that you pictured,
sorry.
did you use any bulking material, or was it all just pure manure?
We decided not to for this round. So yeah, dairy, because we're also thinking about scaling. There's interest from the Bureau of Land Management potentially to do this, especially on their playa areas that are emitting all this dust. So we're trying to, besides the testing, which is part of the management of it, as inexpensive as possible at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Would you suggest putting more carbonaceous, like more woody material in there?
I think it certainly could be a consideration, but you could do
Yeah.
you could do one pile with and one
Yeah.
pile without,
That's
and then compare them, you know.
I think there's a small pilot project at Tamaya Horse
Yeah,
Rescue,
Stephen-
and they're doing horse manure and cow manure and mixes. So that might like kind of like points you in the direction of like how adding more browns.
Bulk.
Yeah. It had a good amount of forage in there, you know, so I don't know. I don't know. We also had a hard time finding a good additive. I mean, down here, we'd sometimes have a hard time like finding enough straw and like woody material and stuff. Although we didn't try super hard. We could have gone to our friends at like the pecan orchards and stuff, probably. And we also do some mastication, or some places do mastication of mesquite. So we could have thought about that, but yeah, we just went raw. Stephen, you've had your hand up. Thank you.
Yes, Sheri, thanks for that great presentation. And a couple of things. One is that the city of Albuquerque back in 1993 did a similar surface application of organic matter to rangeland study with U.S. Forest Service Rocky Mountain Experiment Station.
Okay.
And I still have a year 2001 summary presentation about the results of that study. If you would like to see it,
I would love to.
It may have been published within the Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain Experiment Station system, but I just have the PowerPoint that we put together. So I'm happy to share that with you if you want to either send. I'm on my phone, so I can't actually put it in the chat or anything, but I'm glad to share it with you. If you want to send me an email, I'll respond.
Absolutely. I assume you're on the distribution list from today's meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
excellent. Thank you.
jstvglass@gmail.com is me.
Okay.
And also I'll mention that the New Mexico Recycling Coalition has a free for everyone compost mixture design spreadsheet. Right, you can download it for free. It runs on Google Sheets or Excel, and you can plug in the chemistries, I guess, the physiochemistry for your feedstocks, and it'll help you calculate, various ratios to get the best mix possible.
That is awesome. We would definitely like to check out that tool for sure.
Yeah, happy to share that with you as well in response to your email. And,
thank you.
Glad to help.
Yeah, we were lucky. Yeah, we got like that nice, I guess it was Reunity Resources, right? Maybe for the soil to supper effort, or just their standalone, but their guidebook has been really helpful. Just like a lot of ag research, there's like a lot of information, like the closer you get to like Lincoln, Nebraska, or, you know what I mean? Or something like that. And then we've been lucky to find like great resources from this group for guidance.
Well, we at CDOT actually have, it's actually the Kavir Coalition, that their employee now works for us, a dryland composting guidebook that CJ Ames put together. It's primarily focused on what's it called, aerated static windrow approach, which is more complicated and I'm not really a fan, but
Okay.
you know, because it's so complicated. I mean, I think John will agree that it's just there's no need for blowers and pipes and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
that is available for free if you would like that. And I will draw your attention to a similar manure shed that is going on in the Chicago area.
Fantastic.
I have a friend who's actually involved with that up in the Chicago area. If you know, I mean, it's a whole different environment up there, but they've been doing it for a while, and they apparently have 6 farms involved in, and I think they're actually using it to create biogas.
Yep.
It's for sale to the. So that's kind of a whole different approach to manure management, but after biogas production, the residual becomes compostable. So yet another possible connection for you.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. So I should have specified. So we do have folks working all across the US, and like we've, definitely written about the Midwest kind of case and learning more in Minnesota, but around Chicago would be great. And this, the whole energy takeoff of manure, just because it's a package of all these elements and resources, but it's just such a messy, it's just an unwieldy package, but there's so much in there. So taking the carbon off and then whatever's left. I hear different things about if it's a digester, like the digestate, like how that's working for people, and
I like that technology myself. It captures some directly usable, gas fuel, and then have a compostable, or actually essentially composted residual that you can use for soil enhancement. So
they were up in Clovis talking about doing a digester, and then it's called biofiltro. So it's basically like it's like vermi composting on the other side of that. So actually using the worms on the sludge, or on the digestate is a better word. And then you have the castings.
Oh, we should have specified in the study that the city did with the Rocky Mountain Experiment Station. It was actually human manure, what they call human. It was not bovine manure. It was, what they called sludge from the wastewater treatment plant. But the principle is the same, and they did some pretty good measurements of vegetative response and soil chemistry as well. So
we call them, or I've heard people call them biosolids.
We call them biosolids, nowadays, because sludge sounds so nasty.
I know.
And biosolids sound so not nasty.
That. Yes, I saw. There was also, I don't know if anybody was aware of how New York City like had a big train of their own like poop coming over to like way West Texas, and then applied that.
Yep. I remember that. That was incredibly expensive way to manage biosolids from New York, taking it out to rangeland in West Texas. I remember that project. But I guess if you don't have any other means of disposing it, like New York City, it's worth the money. Yeah,
I guess it couldn't have penciled out. I'm curious about when they made the call that was not worth it. You know what I mean? But because it seems like a long way to put it on a train.
Yeah. Well, you don't want a derailment with a train full of.
No.
So since we're speaking about different composting mixtures, I have sort of a question comment hybrid, which is or do you have a goal for this composting process? And I ask this because I think if you're trying to cultivate a lot of beneficial microorganisms, then there might be one approach, or if you're trying to reduce volume, there's a different approach, or just
That's such a good question. I'm glad you're asking. So this was, we're really looking at these interdunes spaces. And these guys, because we just are dealing with a lot of these down here in the Chihuahuan Desert, where it's just scoured again to that like B horizon. So we have been puzzling over like when we're done and when we want to let it cure. Yeah, I could use help on that goal setting around that. Part of this was really building a relationship with our local dairies in the shed that we're in, and kind of working with some of the dairy producers who are left in that area, and kind of take some off their hands and kind of learn from them about their composting in the past. But this is having a strong objective I could use help with that, with the composting process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if you've interacted at all with Dr. David Johnson and Wu-Chen Su, who are doing a lot of trials of their compost, because that method is definitely capable of creating a really densely populated compost that has a lot of beneficial microorganisms, and they're seeing certain effects from that.
Yes, I have met him before, but yeah, no, he's not like direct, but I could contact him again.
Because I think that the story of, when he started doing that work was because he was trying to deal with solids from dairy. That's how he developed that, that bioreactor.
Great. I didn't know that. Yes, I definitely don't want to recreate any wheels. If that's the same.
Yeah, and I don't even bring it up in that sense, more of, it seems like that model of a static aerobic pile that has, 50 to 70% moisture, which is what he's going for, and it can be accomplished in a lot of different setups for larger and smaller scales. But it's a pretty basic concept of keeping air access, having everything in the pile have a foot or 2 feet to some kind of chimney vent so it can stay aerobic. It seems like he showed that works, and then that's the material that he's using for a lot of these more like agriculture cropland restoration projects. But I think it would be really interesting to see if there was some kind of synergy with rangeland restoration, because I think that just applying organic matter that may not have a whole lot of microorganisms in it, or a certain set of, maybe some bacteria, but maybe not so densely fungal, for example, might have a pretty different effect potentially from a really fungal compost. So that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Although I just read a really amazing article about the sort of like the fungal domination. Anyway, I don't want to like ruffle feathers, but like there was an interesting article of like is the pursuit of fungal dominated everything the be all end all? Anyway, it's a really interesting article. I will share it out with you all. I found it really interesting and food for thought. So not to like disagree, but there's an interesting article out there.
Yeah, that sounds like I would love to see that article, and I'm interested in that conversation.
Yeah, I'll send it out around.
Yeah, and I bring it, I think, so I'm sort of pointing at the Johnson Sioux compost is often really, we talk about it as fungally dominant, but it's also just really has a really high biomass of bacteria as well. There's just a lot of living organisms in it, as opposed to a lot of other composts. So that's whether we're talking fungi, bacteria, or predators. I just wonder what having a more alive compost would do, and if it's worth the effort to do that.
Yeah, frankly, this was like kind of a proto trial and just seeing if it could just stay down at all, you know, because we just have super windy conditions. So this was very much, yeah, I think we're gonna fine tune it, and I'm really happy to have this guidance and the suggestion to contact them, because I haven't connected with them for a while, but yeah, this was like kind of a nuts and bolts thing. Like, can we even get this to stay in this like incredibly crappy soil between the shrubs?
See, and then I of course, me being the I'm like, what biocrusts were there? Like, I bet there was something there, but that's
Biocrusts are
actually not true.
always-
I've been at Jornada places where there just wasn't even biocrust, so.
Yes, and this might be one of those I mean, this is super scoured. Like this is
Yeah,
kind
where
of
it's
like
just
the
like that intense scour, they can't even get
post-apocalyptic
started.
looking
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, this is where like a lot of like threshold dynamics were studied as far as like state, you know, it was like this kind of ecological state and then really changed. And it's really hard to reverse. But yes, so biological soil crusts are very important to consider in all arid lands research for sure.
This is super cool. I'm so excited and I have to jump off, but I'm glad to get to see you again, Sheri.
Yeah, nice to see you. Nice to see
Thanks.
you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for organizing as always.
Bye, Eva. And yeah, we are at the top of the hour, so
All right.
we can wrap it up. Thank you so much, Sheri, for you know, all of this work that you're doing and for getting it to us.
Well, thank you again so much for the invitation. And I will, if it's okay, maybe when we have the date for the Santa Fe lunch discussion, if folks would could possibly make it for that. I don't know, Isabel, if I could share that with the group. And okay. Yeah, things are a little up in the air, but we're going to do the best we can. And I thank you so much. So thank you all for your good work that you're doing. And Stephen, I'll be in touch about stuff.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.